The PS3 era of gaming was definitely an interesting and fun one. I think game developers were still willing to be innovative and creative with their ideas, especially when it came to genres that had been around for so long. So, when a remake of Like a Dragon Ishin, a game that never released outside of Japan, was announced, it was definitely a welcome surprise. Hey guys, I'm Christian. This is a review of Like a Dragon Ishin. I played it on the PlayStation 5. Before we hop into the review though, do me a favor you guys, like and subscribe down below. It definitely means tons to me. And with that, let's hop into the video. So starting with the story of this game, if you guys didn't know, Like a Dragon Ishin is a spin-off of the mainline Yakuza series games. But if you've never played a Yakuza game before, don't worry because this is a standalone story that doesn't actually take place with anything with the actual Yakuza mainline games. The story of Like a Dragon Ishin takes place in the end of the Edo period in Japan. The game will have the players play as Sakamoto Ryoma as you journey along his quest to avenge his father's death. The game will have Ryoma run into countless numbers of colorful characters, many of which who seem very blunt and bloodthirsty from the beginning, but then as you get to know them more, you can definitely see the layers that build up these characters. The game has no shortages of unique and interesting characters. The only problem with this is that the game will give you just enough time to like a character and be interested in hearing the rest of the story, but then doesn't actually deliver with the rest of the character or how their story really ends. They chose a very interesting style of storytelling as they definitely like to go very soap opera and very dramatic with their interactions. Sometimes when it feels like nothing really big is actually happening, the characters definitely over dramatize everything, and it definitely makes it more interesting to hear their one-on-one interactions. The game likes to juggle back and forth between being dark and mysterious and very serious to being very comical and lighthearted, which gives a interesting balance and kind of yin and yang to the storytelling that keeps you on your feet and never knowing what's happening next. All in all, the story was interesting. It definitely kept things going. I definitely had issues with the pacing of it. It took a little bit of time for things to build up as I wanted it to, but the characters were interesting enough to keep me through the dull moments, and then the gameplay was definitely the key of this game. The game is very impressive when you consider how old it is. It is a somewhat open world game where they kind of limit the open world aspect of it. You can freely roam this city as much as possible and interact with tons of NPCs and buildings. The game manages to keep it feeling lively with the many interactions they throw at you every left and right corner. It's very interesting how you never know when you're going to be in a battle or in a communication side quest, and it definitely likes to throw those at you consistently. The NPCs are very hit or miss, as some of them are very interesting to talk with, like a little boy who just wants to hang out with the other kids but lacks the toys to do so, or the author who's struggling to write a story together. But then there are those NPCs that are clearly just there to fill up the space with their side chatter. They don't really add anything to the game except for being there. Some of them are kind of annoying as they kind of block your way from walking into places and sometimes take away from the immersion. But if I was really to sit back and think about it, I feel like the open world will definitely feel like it was missing something had those NPCs not been there. So all in all, I think they were a necessary component to the game. I love how combat heavy the game is, but then I also love how it balances out with its quirkiness between like some of the boss fights or some of the interactions with some of the characters. It definitely reminds me of like an old school samurai movie where I'm being attacked left and right by random people, and some of the interactions kind of felt unnecessary, but they definitely add to the character's growth, and I like that. I know the Yakuza series is known for their mini games that they throw out the game, and I think a lot of the mini games in this game were pretty fun, from like slashing the cannonballs or like fishing. It definitely made the game feel varied, and there was tons of content for me to always be doing. Alright, now let's get into the most important part of the game, and that's the gameplay of this. I feel like the gameplay is definitely what carried this game. It's what kept me through all the dull moments, from switching between different fighting styles to consistently fighting different types of enemies. The bosses were definitely varied. Sometimes were very challenging, but never seemed unfair, and I definitely appreciate that. You have 4 different fighting styles to choose from. One of them being the brawler, which is you just fight with your bare fists. You had the ability to fight with a sword, which felt more like your traditional samurai style of fighting. You can use a gun, which allows you to attack from a distance, which was very useful for some of the weaker enemies. And finally, you had the wild dancer, which utilizes a sword and a gun at the same time. This was definitely the most chaotic and definitely the most fun to be using. The game felt very smooth to fight with, especially as you progress and start to upgrade a lot of your skills. Comboing felt very intuitive and it definitely felt very efficient. And then when you build up the heat gauge, you're able to use different abilities based off of whatever fighting style you're using at the moment. And it was very rewarding to see play out, especially with the animations. They're very bloody sometimes. All in all, there was very little problems to be said about the combat. The only thing that I kind of wish would happen sometimes, but I get it that it's an older game, so maybe it was harder to have in this type of game. But I would definitely wish there was a way to switch between your fighting styles mid combo. All in all, the combat of this game was very satisfying and rewarding, and it was definitely the main reason why you want to be playing this game. It kept things varied throughout the game, especially as you progress and level up each skill. And then the 4 different combat styles definitely were fun to experiment with and see which ones worked in specific moments and what was kind of more optimal. As far as graphics go, this game looks good for the time that it is. It's definitely a remake, and then that shows throughout some of the way the level are mapped out. I feel like a lot of the dev time was spent on making these faces look as beautiful as they did. They put a lot of little details in the marks on their faces, especially when they were talking or arguing back and forth. I feel like as far as visual goes, my favorite part was definitely the character animations, from the slashes to the colors. Like when you have your heat on and you're colored in blue, and then the enemy's heat on and they're colored in red, and you guys are kind of slashing back and forth, it definitely adds something very eye-catching to look at. One of the last things I want to touch on is the sound of this game. The music OST is phenomenal, and a lot of the voice acting is just superb. It definitely makes this game feel fully fleshed out, and it was definitely beautiful for my ears to listen to. I mean, all in all, this game is a very easy recommendation from me. From the characters to the fighting style to the story, everything was very phenomenal, minus some pacing issues that I feel like, I mean, if you struggle to get through the beginning part, I recommend just sticking through it. The characters will definitely keep it interesting, and then the fighting will definitely be worth it. Well, those are my final thoughts on this game. Again, this has been Christian. Let me know down below if you guys are going to be picking this up or if you have already picked it up. With that, I'll see you guys on the next video.